The auctioneer's gavel slammed down like a thunderclap, silencing the crowd. "Sold," he bellowed, his voice cold as the iron chains that once bound the girls on the block. In a dusty town square, beneath a sky bruised with storm clouds, the daughters of Willow Creek were sold one by one to men with greedy eyes and heavy coin purses. Mothers wept, fathers turned away, and the girls, dressed in tattered white dresses, stood trembling as their futures were bartered. All but one. In the shadow of the platform, a girl with defiance in her eyes and dirt smudged across her face stood alone, unsold, unwanted. Her name was Elara. The crowd whispered her fate, too stubborn, too plain, too broken. But as the auction ended and the townsfolk dispersed, a stranger stepped forward, a widower, gray at the temples, with a quiet strength in his gaze. He offered not coin, but his name. And in that moment, Elara's story, one of loss, resilience, and unexpected redemption, began to unfold. Willow Creek was a town forgotten by time, nestled in a valley where the river ran dry and hope was a luxury few could afford. The war had taken its men, the drought its crops, and desperation had birthed a cruel tradition, the auction of daughters to wealthy outsiders, a sacrifice to keep the town alive. Families, drowning in debt, offered their girls to men from distant cities, merchants, landowners, or worse, men with shadows in their smiles. The townsfolk justified it, whispering it was for survival, but the weight of shame hung heavy in the air. Elara, the youngest of the Tanner family, had watched her three sisters, Lila, Mara, and sweet little Wren, sold over the years. Each time, her heart fractured a little more. Lila went to a silk merchant who promised her finery but locked her in a gilded cage. Mara's buyer was a cold-eyed landowner who valued her labor over her spirit. Wren, barely 16, was taken by a man whose name no one dared speak. Elara, now 19, was the last daughter left, and the town's patience with her family's debts had run out. Elara was no beauty by Willow Creek's standards. Her hair was a wild tangle of chestnut, her hands calloused from working the fields, and her tongue too sharp for the delicate deference expected of auction girls. She'd stood on the block 3 times before, and each time, the bids were scarce. Too defiant, they said. No man wants a wife who argues. Her father, a broken man with a bottle for a heart, had all but given up on her. Her mother, worn thin by grief, could barely meet her eyes. But Elara refused to break. She'd seen what happened to her sisters, heard their letters filled with veiled pleas for rescue, and vowed she'd never let her soul be sold. Yet, as the auction day loomed, the pressure mounted. The Tanners owed more than they could ever repay, and the town council was clear, Elara was their last chance, or the family would be cast out to starve. The morning of the auction dawned gray and heavy. Elara stood on the creaking wooden platform, her wrists bound loosely with rope for show, her chin lifted despite the jeers from the crowd. The auctioneer, a man named Grimes whose greed outshone his conscience, rattled off her flaws like a litany, plain of face, sharp of tongue, but strong enough for labor. The crowd snickered, and a few men bid half-heartedly, their offers more mockery than intent. Elara's heart pounded, but she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, imagining escape, freedom, anything but this. As the bids dwindled and Grimes prepared to declare her unsold, a voice cut through the murmurs. "I'll take her." It was soft but firm, coming from a man at the edge of the crowd. Elias Morrow, a widower who lived on the outskirts of town, stepped forward. He was in his late 40s, with weathered hands and eyes that carried a quiet sorrow. The crowd fell silent, stunned. Elias was known but not known, a man who kept to himself, a carpenter who'd lost his wife and son to fever 5 years prior. He had no wealth, no status, only a small cabin and a name that meant little to the town's elite. "I offer my name," he said, meeting Elara's gaze. "If she'll have it." The townsfolk scoffed. A name? What was that worth when coin was king? But Elara saw something in Elias's eyes, kindness, perhaps, or a shared defiance against a world that had taken too much. Against her father's protests and the council's sneers, she nodded. "I'll go with him," she said, her voice steady. The gavel fell, not with a sail, but with a strange new beginning. As they left the square, whispers followed them, but Elara felt a spark of something she hadn't known in years. Hope. Life with Elias was not what Elara expected. His cabin was modest, with a single room warmed by a stone hearth and shelves lined with books, rare treasures in Willow Creek. He treated her not as a servant or a prize, but as an equal. He taught her to carve wood, to read the stars, to mend what was broken. He shared stories of his late wife, Anna, whose laughter had once filled the cabin, and his son, Caleb, whose tiny shoes still sat by the door. Elara, in turn, spoke of her sisters, her fears, and the anger that burned in her chest. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a commodity, but as a person. Yet, the shadow of the auction lingered. The town watched them, waiting for failure. Rumors spread that Elias was a fool, that Elara would run or ruin him. Worse, word came that her sisters were suffering, Lila trapped in a loveless marriage, Mara worked to exhaustion, and Ren missing altogether. Elara's resolve hardened, she would find her sisters, free them, no matter the cost. The challenge was daunting. Elara had no money, no power, and the town council, led by Grimes, held sway over Willow Creek's secrets. Elias, though supportive, warned her of the danger. "The men who bought your sisters don't let go easily," he said, his voice heavy with experience. But Elara was undeterred. She began asking questions, sneaking into the council's records at night, piecing together where her sisters had been taken. She learned Lila was in a city 3 days' ride away, Mara on a remote estate, and Ren, her heart sank, had been sold to a man known for cruelty, his whereabouts unknown. Each discovery fueled her determination but also her fear. What if she was too late? What if her sisters were lost forever? Elias became her anchor. He didn't try to stop her but offered his tools, his knowledge, and his quiet strength. Together, they devised a plan. Elara would travel to the city to find Lila, using Elias's savings to pose as a trader's apprentice. It was risky. Women traveling alone were vulnerable, and the council would suspect her motives. But Elara refused to wait. The journey was grueling, the roads rough and the nights cold. In the city, she found Lila, pale and hollow-eyed, trapped in a mansion where her husband treated her like a possession. Lila's spirit was bruised but not broken. "I thought no one would come," she whispered, tears falling as Elara embraced her. Convincing Lila to leave was harder. She feared her husband's wrath, but Elara's fierce love won out. They fled under cover of night, returning to Elias's cabin, where Lila began to heal, her laughter slowly returning. Mara's rescue was harder. The landowner who owned her estate was powerful, his fields guarded by men with no mercy. Elara and Elias posed as buyers, offering to purchase Mara's contract. The deception nearly failed when the landowner grew suspicious, but Elias's calm demeanor and Elara's quick thinking secured Mara's release. She was gaunt, her hands scarred from labor, but her eyes lit up when she saw her sisters. The reunion was bittersweet. Ren was still out there, and the trail had gone cold. Elara's hope wavered, but Elias's steady presence kept her grounded. "We'll find her," he promised, and she believed him. The search for Ren led them to dark corners of the region, where rumors spoke of a man who bought girls only to break them. Elara's heart ached with every dead end, but a letter from a former auction girl, now free, gave them a lead. Ren was alive, hidden in a mining town controlled by her buyer. The final journey was the most perilous. The town was a lawless place, and Elara and Elias were outnumbered. But Elara's courage and Elias's ingenuity, using his carpentry skills to sabotage the man's operations, created a distraction. They found Ren, frail but defiant, locked in a shed. The escape was chaotic, with pursuers close behind, but Elias's knowledge of the land and Elara's fierce determination got them to safety. Back in Willow Creek, the sisters reunited, their bond stronger for the pain they'd endured. The town, shamed by their return, began to question the auctions. Elara, now a symbol of resistance, spoke out, her voice carrying the weight of her sister's stories. The council, pressured by growing unrest, abolished the practice, though Grimes fled with his profits. Elara and her sisters rebuilt their lives with Elias, who became family not by blood but by choice. The cabin, once quiet with grief, rang with laughter again. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Elara stood with her sisters and Elias, looking out at a town that was beginning to heal. The auctions were gone, but the scars remained. Yet, in those scars was a story of resilience, of a girl who refused to be sold, and a widower who offered not just his name, but his heart. Their story, told and retold, became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love and courage could rewrite a broken ending. And for the viewers watching, tears in their eyes and hearts full, the message was clear: no one is ever truly unsold when someone sees their worth.